r/NoSleep. Posted by u/trip14. If your child mentions a man with 3 yellow eyes, you need to listen. I'm sitting in the rocking chair in the corner of my son's room. In the opposite corner there is a man-shaped silhouette, head cocked at an angle, staring at me with 3 yellow eyes. 2 of them are right where a human's eyes should be, but there is one settled about where I think the thing's forehead is. They glow softly just like my son had explained. Ever since it entered the room there is a ringing in my ear that must be similar to tinnitus. Not especially painful but irritating in a way that puts you slightly on edge. You'd know this damn thing was in here even if you didn't see it. It isn't moving right now but occasionally it will. I'm not sure how to describe it. It blinks in and out, I guess. It blinks and the head is turned at the opposite angle as dogs sometimes do when you talk to them. My son has talked about the man with 3 yellow eyes since he was able to form a coherent sentence. Every 4 or 5 nights he would wake up crying out for us and one or both of us would head to his room to see what was wrong. We always turned on the hallway light to illuminate our way into his room since the floor was often a minefield of scattered toys placed in just such a way to puncture the foot of a groggy adult. He would tell us the man with 3 yellow eyes was in his room watching him. He never mentions him trying to hurt him, talk to him, or touch him. Just watches him. Complaints of a headache often come along with these weekly events. We give him some ibuprofen, soothe him until he is calm, and down he goes. In the morning he will recount the events again, but by mid-morning all concerns of the man with 3 yellow eyes seems to fade away. At age 3 our son was still having his weekly occurrences of the man with 3 yellow eyes. It was summer break and my wife, a school teacher, mentioned that she wanted to go visit her parents in another state and I recommended it. It would give me a great chance to get a few things on the endless list of things to do knocked off. The thought also entered my mind that this may be the best chance for me to spend the night in my son's room and see if there was an environmental factor creating the illusion of the yellow-eyed intruder. I can still remember as a child that the silhouette of my jacket hanging on the door looked like a gremlin hanging from the hook. Other times the settling of our old house would produce a noise I was sure could only be caused by some ancient beast in the attic. We all grew up with our own personal boogeyman and I was determined to see what caused my son's confusion. Earlier this evening after my wife and son departed for her parents I performed my usual bedtime routine. Checked the door locks, quick microwave dinner, brushed my teeth, pajamas, and then off to bed. I shut off the light and stretched out in my son's twin-sized bed. As I hadn't slept in a twin since I was a child myself there was some adjusting to be done before I was able to comfortably settle in. Glancing around the room I didn't immediately notice anything that could be mistaken for the man with 3 yellow eyes. For nearly an hour I looked around and continued to fail to find a culprit. Around 11 p.m. I began to noticeably drifting off to sleep when suddenly in front of me 3 yellow dots appeared in my field of vision. With a shock I jolted up in the bed and the 3 yellow dots disappeared. For a few minutes I sat breathing heavily and laughing internally for letting myself get wrapped up in this boogeyman hunt. After I had calmed back down I put my head back on the pillow and the 3 yellow dots slowly reappeared. Without the fog of sleep I could see that the security light at the back of the house was able to make its way through 3 holes in the window blinds. There was a privacy hedge outside my son's window that blocked almost all of the light except for this small area. I began congratulating myself for solving the mystery so quickly. It must be some nocturnal animal that sets off the security light once or twice a week and my son wakes up to 3 pinholes of light and in his sleepy haze thinks there is a mysterious creature watching him sleep. Feeling proud of myself for solving the mystery I grabbed my phone off of his nightstand and get out of bed to head to my own bedroom. No need to spend the rest of the night curled up in a twin bed when a comfortable king-size mattress awaits me. As I turned around to walk to the door I could see a black silhouette shaped like a man blocking the exit. I froze in place and as I came to a stop that is when 3 yellow slits slowly opened and looked in my direction. After shaking my frozen posture I yelled and began to charge in its directions but stumbled backwards when it began moving toward me at the same speed. At the same time a ringing started in my ears. I stumbled backwards in a chair in the corner and as I fell into the chair I saw the thing blink away and then into the opposite corner. I'm not sure how long I initially sat frozen in the chair but the creature just stared, occasionally blinked in place moving the position of its head. Eventually I began to inch out of the chair but it would blink back into the doorway. If I eased back into the chair it would again blink back to the opposite corner and continue the emotionless gaze. A few times I've tried to make a call to emergency services on my phone but all I can hear is white noise on the other line. So again, here I sit in this chair looking back at this thing. This man with 3 yellow eyes. I've spoken to it but when it opens its mouth it emits the same soft yellow glow and a series of clicking noises. It hasn't tried to hurt me and only moves to the door when I try to get up. I have no damn clue what to do. My phone will probably die soon and sharing this is the only thing I can think to try. I'm not even sure this will get out. The man with 3 yellow eyes is still blinking in and out. But now when he blinks back he is a little closer every time now. I'm going to make a break for it soon since I don't have any other options, but I'm sure it won't work. If a child in your family tells you there is a man with 3 yellow eyes watching them sleep, then listen. It is here now looking at me and inching closer, so I guess it doesn't follow the kid that sees them. So get them away and don't look back. And for God's sake don't go sleep in the room where they've been seen. r/NoSleep. Posted by u/Schindler. I quit work as a janitor to the suicide games. I was a world-class janitor. I cannot share my resume of places I have cleaned, only that I am qualified to polish palaces and butler to the wealthiest. That is how I ended up stuck on an island where people are taken to die. They collected people from all over and watched them and kidnapped them and brought them to the island. They called it Suicide Island. It is where they had a series of difficult mazes that they put people into after drugging them. If they could solve the maze they were actually allowed to go home. They were reverse kidnapped and placed back where they were originally taken. Sometimes that actually did happen. As a janitor that was forced to work on the island, I knew who all the paying audience were. Hundreds of elite could afford to watch the victims in the mazes. That was only part of the funding. The rest I did not understand, a mysterious organization that had put people into mazes on islands for a very long time, some kind of cult. I was not allowed to listen to anything discussed by the cult. That did not mean that I heard nothing. I learned that they were obsessed with the difficulty of the mazes and the efficiency of the mechanical traps inside. A different group than the dozens of gray-robed monks were in charge of the kidnappings. They wore ordinary cloths, but gray cows went on the island. They also mentioned that the victims had to be adults, not children or elders. On occasion they disqualified someone for being too old, too young or otherwise incapable of escaping from the deadly mazes. They would ship them back home, to the chagrin of the kidnappers. I watched where they kept the files of employees and where they kept the files on the victims. They were each kept in file cabinets in gray folders. I pondered that for a long time. I had to go into the mazes, as my sanity and skills deteriorated. I was no longer good enough for house cleaning. I was demoted to a slave that scrubbed blood off the floors of the maze while diabolical blades and drills and such were suspended over me in lockout tagout. Other employees sometimes wanted to escape and tried to and were hunted down and usually killed, tortured or given more severe workloads. I didn't want the caprice of my employers to decide my fate. I was too old for that. Some tried to sneak out in body bags, which was just stupid. I never doubted they incinerated the bodies. It turned out I was wrong, they simply tossed them over a cliff, out to sea. The sharks and seagulls and crabs got whatever was upon the rocks below. It was a 1 in a million shot to survive it, maybe 1 in a billion. Seemed asinine. Over the years I began to get a real good understanding of the mazes. There were really only so many configurations around the mechanisms that powered the variety of death traps and they only rarely reinstalled those. I also had worked in the mazes, walking through them with flashlights and tools to maintain the traps themselves, when they were powered down. In general, I wondered if I should take my chances in a maze, as one of their victims. Would they let me go? There wasn't exactly a human resources department that I could ask, on Suicide Island. The strict requirements for someone to be invited to Suicide Island is a suicide attempt. Their agents monitor emergency rooms and suicide hotlines and other places for potential victims. I wondered if trying to escape from their island was lethal enough to warrant a suicide attempt. One day I decided I was just too old to try to escape. I gave up sitting there until they found me not working and beat me up. Some wealthy elite, in their white cowls, walked by and laughed at the cruelty. I was terrified they would beat me to death. "Do you want to die? Get back to work," I was told. I obeyed, frightened and bruised. With terror of Suicide Island in my heart I left my work post again. I was supposed to be cleaning it, an ivory Rube Goldberg with a scythe and tusks that grabbed and maimed. It came out of the floor to trap someone in the dead end. I stared at it in horror, noting the dripping blood and parts of the victims and their clothing that were caught in its gears. It was overly complicated and had many moving parts and blades and large powerful open gears. It was typical of the death traps in the mazes, but far more advanced than the ones I had first seen. Always they were improving the quality of the mazes and death traps. I wondered if there was a corresponding drop in maze survivors, or if their selection process was becoming more progressive as well. Trembling with fear of the device and the maze I began to clean it. I never got used to the awfulness of my job. Instead it grew worse each day. I lived in a horrible nightmare, my work was hell. I realized I would prefer anything. I left my post and began to go back through the maze. I avoided all the traps and dead ends expertly and reached the exit. When I got to the stairs I went up and found the office. 2 cultists were in there and I walked over to the employee cabinet while they worked on something on the table, barely noticing me. I shuffled around with my folder until I was at the other cabinet. On top was an outbox. I set my folder in it. Then I shuffled out of the room, while the cultists muttered to each other. I went to my quarters and slept. I awoke groggy and drugged on the street where I had departed in a taxi to go and meet my boss, a rich guy who had hired me to accompany him on his cruise. The place was different, which made sense. I figured out I had lived on the island for almost 10 years. Times never change. I was wearing a butler's outfit and had my papers and some money. I had a chance to go back to the life I had known. For that, I could never be too old.